Chapter 10. Ulkasur and Gajradhan at Surishila Palace. Towards the west extension of Vali Hills couched the kingdom of Varhana. The palace of Varhana glowed amid the golden pillars pinned on its extensive boundaries and marvelous grandeur of architect and infrastructure. Right in the center of the palace was the imperial colonnade furbished with precious stone tables, cushioned with satin bolsters and sheets, where Ulkasur was giving the lessons of game of chess to Gajradhan on how to beat the opposition with the best of moves. Control the center. Protect the king. Think 4-5 moves in advance and know when to trade pieces are the momentous rules and allow you to control the pace and direction of this game, my dear Earl, said Ulkasur to Gajradhan, smiling maliciously. I yearn to end this game at the earliest. Teach me to do so, respected uncle, grumbled Gajradhan as if he was burning in some anxious desire. Ulkasur knew which game he actually meant to finish. Calm down, son. You will have your turn. My all turn seemed to have turned down from that moment on, grunted Gajradhan in distress. Fortune turns its wheel to favor the underprivileged. Be patient. Wait for the right moment. Ulkasur sounded very peculiar in an intense tone. They both had together attempted futile tries to merge the kingdom of Varhana and Surishila to expand their own single dominion, but in vain. Gajradhan believed that there was no hope from Prince Rohan to coronate after Vajraveer. Hence, he should rightly be the competent heir of the kingdom, after having married the only daughter of King Vajraveer. But after Rohan's marriage with Madhavi, his hopes seemed to fade away, whereas his desires still fumed. Consequently, they were weaving various contemptuous plans to materialize their will. I have been patient enough. His hazel-grey fiery eyes darted at the queen of the white pieces as he moved his knight to chase the rook resting by the king. His angular jaws were shifting to and fro as if he was constantly grinding something stuck between them. He was tall, fit, and full-bodied, complemented by whitish lustrous complexion and dense dark curly hair that dangled over the strings of thick beads hanging around his neck. A long purple drape hid his left breast, falling down till his dhoti tied around his lower waistline and legs. He wore buckled shoes made of fine leather. We ought to change the rules. I don't want to turn old by keep waiting for your so-called right moment, growled Gajradhan. Straightforwardness with the straightforward. Crookedness with the crooked. Ulkasur signaled Gajradhan in his usual fancy words, looking at him cannily like a vicious demon. He glided his crooked fingers on his long, mousy beard, clutching its spare, rough hair between his knuckles. His long, crooked nose looked perfect companion of his dwarfish, frail body. His expression was of frustration and ferocity. See the center. He took Gajradhan's queen by his bishop and snapped scornfully, waggling his long black burnished wrap with claw palm around his forearm. I see the center, uncle. Now I see it. Gajradhan murmured, lazed into his wicked thoughts. When do we leave for Surishila for Kaumudi festival? He asked next. Ruplakshmi must be dreadfully missing her parents, he added with a scornful smile. There was an invitation from Queen Balakrishna for having her daughter in the festivities of grand celebration of Kaumudi festival, primarily during the distribution of earthen lamps in people, which indeed was always Rupalakshmi's favorite part of the celebration. Ulkasur always attended the festivals with Gajradhan and Rupalakshmi in the name of meeting his friend Vajravir in their visits to Suryashila, which for sure Gajradhan never objected to. Just before the 5 days before the festival began, the spiteful duo bobbed up in the kingdom of Suryashila along with Rupalakshmi. They received a warm welcome from the king and queen. "Thanks for bringing my daughter to me. How terribly I have been missing her," expressed Balakrishna. "You are such a prince of glory and gentleness, an ideal son, an honest partner, and a good son-in-law." She smiled while saying these warm words gently. "That's what he is expected to be," sneered Ulkasur with banal feelings at the simple gesture of the queen while entering. Ulkasur spent most of his time being around his friend King Vajravir. They talked for hours, played chess, and shared jokes. King Vajravir also took pleasure in humorous company of Ulkasur, since he was completely oblivious of his hostile intentions. Ulkasur, in one of his spare time, was taking a stroll in the garden of the palace, trudging the fresh blades of soft grass under his stomping feet. He was bearing some immoral intention in his freaking mind that day, and it was sure when he walked ahead and furtively entered the royal kitchen where the chief cook was looking after the arrangements for dinner. He was giving a good stir to every recipe cooked in a huge pot and covering them with their lids. Ulkasur stood behind and started whizzing his right hand index fingers towards the cook, rolling it like a spindle. A spout of thin soot formed in long spiraling twine and started hovering around chef's neck. Cook looked back and stood eye to eye with him, but couldn't move a bit at being completely hypnotized by his black magic. "Serve a platter," commanded Ulkasur. Chef did the same. Ulkasur plucked out a tiny glass jar from the folds of his cloth tied on his waist and sprinkled pale yellow drops in every dish served in the platter. The chef stood lifeless like a stone, unreactive to all activities going on there. "Now go and let our dear Prince Roshan feast on it," ordered Ulkasur. The chef, under the magic spell, abided by his saying and advanced to Prince's room. At the same instant, Rudra was on his security inspection, rambling across the doors, by the galleries, and through the entrances. As he was passing the front hallway, the chef passed right by him, speeding like a sped arrow. Rudra noticed his brisk walk and seemed gauche on a servant's part. He surmised that something was surely wrong. He immediately stopped him and tried to find out what he was up to. He stared straight into his eyes. "Where are you heading to?" "To the prince," all he could utter. "Prince?" inquired Rudra. "Prince Roshan," he replied without even blinking his large bulging eyes. Now Rudra sensed something wrong with the chef's tongue-tied expressions. "What do you carry in your hands?" he asked. "Food for the prince," he replied. Rudra uncovered the lids and stared at the food as if reading it minutely. He was by then not only alarmed by the approaching danger, but also sure of something deadly had been mixed in the food. He held the chef tight by his arms and dragged him to the king's court in the presence of Vishnukarma and other ministers and courtiers. The lifeless chef didn't defend but stood like a statue in the middle of the court. All eyes stared at him, awestruck at this strangely odd instance. Rudra addressed the king. "Your Highness, I suspect this chef is up to a devious scheme against our Prince Rohan." "How you suspect that?" King was intimidated at hearing Rohan's name in the plot. "That there is something wrong in this food," Rudra answered. "Something wrong? What do you mean something wrong? And what makes you believe that?" King was indeed perplexed. "He stands fearlessly lost, doesn't react much. Moreover, he did not even bother to greet you. Isn't this all strange for a royal chef to behave like?" Rudra pointed on the little decent rules and regulations attributed to the royal code. King Vajraveer tried to discern what Rudra was pointing at and looked at Vishnukarma, seeking his recognition after the same. Vishnukarma nodded in agreement. "Chef, I command you to speak, a bit for your defense," bellowed King, but the chef did not reply. Ulkasur, who was also present with Gajradhan in the court, expecting the triumph of their wicked plan, was now thunderstruck at Rudra's assertion. "Before these proceedings led to any destruction of this buffoon rises from the impact and might open his foolish mouth, I must do something," thought Ulkasur. "We must test his honesty on another course," he intervened, jumping out of his seat. "He can taste the food right now and prove whether there's anything wrong or not. Everything will be crystal clear," he suggested with malicious intent. "You need not take someone's life to prove his innocence," Rudra voted his suggestion. "Then how we testify your allegations, my boy?" Ulkasur mocked, irritably impatient. "We always have a substitute for a resolution," submitted Vishnukarma. To confirm Rudra's allegation, King Vajraveer asked the Rajvaidya to examine each preparation. Rajvaidya was skillful enough to examine and find about any venomous poison, either from plants or from poisonous reptiles. He brought some clean and lucid substance from his lab and sprinkled it into the food. To everyone's shock, the food turned venom blue, leaving them anesthetized at its occurrence. King Vajraveer, outraged with extreme anger, ordered the soldiers to put the chef behind the bars. But Gajradhan, who had coined acrimony for Rudra, in his usual jostle, raised his doubt aloud. "But how did you find out that there was poison in the food, or you already knew that?" He stressed the last few words more than usual. Rudra was immensely crossed at Gajradhan's portent, but had to calm down at Vishnukarma's well-horned looks and answered, "I am the son of Vaidya Sushutra and Mother Sanjeevani, who excel in identifying any sort of poison by a small sniff, and I inherited this skill from my experienced parents." "Beyond any doubt, my boy," added Vishnukarma with a gleam of conviction for Rudra. Vishnukarma in fact had a clear vision about who was behind that conspiracy, but did not think appropriate to speak of it for holding no concrete evidence. Perhaps he had more to see of Rudra instead. Nevertheless, his intense look at Ulkasur panicked him down to his innermost nerves. King Vajraveer trusted Vishnukarma more than anyone else in his court. Hence, he clogged any further arguments on suspecting Rudra. Rather, he asked Rudra to find the culprit behind that evil will of trying to kill his son. Ulkasur and Gajradhan were highly agitated at their yet another failure. Gajradhan busted his anger in fierceness. "Can you ever plan something that really works? And who is this new entry we have never seen before? How come he is so revered?" he blasted, breaking an enormous vase with a single blow of his arm. You want a lot of high-quality material to win each game. Have patience, my dear Earl. Have patience. Ulkasur tried to console Gajradhan by his gaudy words again. Calm down. We have days to stay. I will figure out something soon. Gajradhan did not seem pleased at all. But just then he glanced at Madhavi through the window, who was placing diyas on the boundary walls of terrace with Rupalakshmi and other maidservants. This was indeed her favorite part too during the festival of Kaumudi. Gajradhan was passionately attracted towards Madhavi's exceptional beauty since the very first time he saw her. He kept looking at her, finally smirking for a bit, while Ulkasur kept speaking words of solace to subdue his temper, unaware of his eventual escape from the room. Gajradhan reached on the terrace and stood by the pedestal steadily gawking at Madhavi. What could be more divine than this beautiful face? He plunged into foul, erotic thoughts, staring continuously at her. His face was aglow with the last orange rays before twilight beckoned the stars. His lips bore the semblance of a smile, just enough to show that he was enjoying his thoughts, whatever they may be, until Rupalakshmi noticed him from a far distance where she stood among the rows of light and beamed at him out of her innate affection for him, assuming that he had gone up to see her. She asked him to wait until they finished, but Gajradhan cooked up a story for finding an opportunity to send her away. Uncle Ulkasur wishes to see you for some special custom that has to be completed before midnight. I just came to communicate this message to you. You should immediately go and see him. Rupalakshmi had been longing for a child and had trusted everyone blindly with something to suggest an effective remedy about infertility in her. Ulkasur assured her that if she performed a family custom at her mother's place, would benefit to get rid of her inability to conceive. Assuming this was the call for the same purpose, she rushed down without asking anything from Gajradhan, hence leaving Madhavi all by herself. Gajradhan did not leave but waited for Rupalakshmi to fade completely from the scene. Then he turned around and looked at Madhavi with his typical evil glee. Vexed at his clumsy demeanor, however, Madhavi too did not feel to stay and advanced to leave. But Gajradhan blocked her way and requested to stay. Madhavi was quiet but stood fearlessly. Grabbing the opportunity, Gajradhan started flattering Madhavi with his exorbitant praises for her intelligence, bravery, dexterity and beauty, to which Madhavi reacted not for a speck of moment. She had observed him several times before, as well with his ill intent always twitching at the back of his monstering mind, but never spoke of it thinking about Rupalakshmi, who was an innocent soul. Moreover, Madhavi was a strong woman to withstand such transactions on her own. Gajradhan slowly shifted a bit toward her and said, I have high regards for you, and I hope you admit it already. Madhavi said nothing. You are blessed in profusion with beauty, charm and magnetism. But she stood still and quiet. I fail to believe you have seized your honor for a crippled man who in no manner deserves a woman like you. Still, no reaction from her. How painful it must have been for you to survive like this, without a capable partner. He stressed a little more, but in vain. Stop acting like a stone with no heart and unbolt what you resist. Gajradhan snarled in aggression. Madhavi unwearingly turned to Gajradhan, finally to break her silence, and said, I have heard of your dynamic vigor and immutable powers, but never have witnessed any. Why not add on to beauty of this festival with one of your charms? Gajradhan stood dumbfounded while Madhavi continued. If you please, I would like you to wrestle with one of our warriors tomorrow morning in the wrestle ground of Surishila. Gajradhan, perplexed at her response, neither thought nor said anything for a while, perhaps wondering about all her unexpected praises and admiration. Was that all what she finally had to say? Where did that rustling thought come from? He looked back at Madhavi and tried to comprehend what those plain expressions actually meant, but his fickle mind flung again. She is probably trying to test my strength. Gajradhan contemplated and accepted the challenge as an opportunity of honor to prove his heroism to Madhavi and impress her, but he was unaware of Madhavi's nimble-witted trick to use him as a weapon to test Rudra's physical strength against him, as well as to thwart his nastiness once he sluppered the defeat, which Madhavi presumably intuited already. Wish he had some brain with body. Madhavi sent a written scroll to Vishnukarma narrating his entire encounter with Gajradhan and informed him that she had wanted to propose Rudra's name for the match. Vishnukarma shared the conflict that occurred between Madhavi and Gajradhan, as well as Rudra being Madhavi's preference for a face-off with Gajradhan. An eccentric rave started to blow in his heart after listening to the episodic encounter between Madhavi and Gajradhan. How he wished he was there that moment to crush Gajradhan between his stocky palms. But as he thought of Madhavi's consideration for him over all the greatest fighters of the kingdom, his mind could trace no clue for such a decision. He could feel the heat growing in his cheeks, his heart pounding suddenly in perplexity of delinquent thoughts. He first looked down to his feet and then slowly peered around as if searching for some meaning. I see a ray of hope in this opportunity for you to prove yourself, your strength and vigor. He heard Vishnukarma's voice descending from his right. He looked over his shoulders to comprehend which hope Vishnu was talking about, which was of course clearer about defeating Gajradhan than anything else. This chance can help you unearth your talent to fight a demon. Take it. Continued Vishnukarma. I will no doubt fight against that evil to teach him a good lesson, brawled Rudra in a determined tone. If we fight with intention to defeat, we lose the game before it begins, said Vishnukarma. Then I should fight to win, right? Inquired Rudra, shrugging his shoulders in amazement at his gesture. Similarly, fighting with an intention to win limits the true identity of our strength, added Vishnukarma. Okay, then I should just fight, expecting no outcome. I get it. Rudra spoke in his firm confirmation. No, you should fight for justice, for esteem, for your people, for peace, for nature, for equality, and to top it all, for your nation and humanity, my boy. Because what man makes a nation, nation makes man, a human, explained Vishnukarma. If you win this fight, which I am sure you will set a laudable example for the youth of our nation. At your benignity, I shall give my best, my master. Bless me, to prove the same. Rudra's spunk said it all. Vishnukarma gazed at him profoundly as if absorbing his glinting spark in exchange of his abundance of blessing alighting on his golden spirit. Next day, in the wrestling ground of Surishila, standing belligerently by King Vajravir's regal throne, sited on a high-altitude mezzanine, amid the joyous percussion of drums and barrels, Vishnukarma heralded. On this auspicious day, amid the celebrations of Kaumadi festival, our imperial guest, Prince Gajradhan, wishes to overwhelm us all with his impenetrable powers by fighting the match of wrestling. and to face him in this combat. The crusader who has volunteered is our royal security chief, Rudra. The audience, who have been rejoicing till that moment, ceased at Vishnukarma's announcement. As they had still not seen Rudra's genius in the match of wrestling, and there was no warrior strong enough in that state to stand against Gajradhan's powerful arms. However, they did applaud for Rudra's appearance on the field. Gajradhan had hated Rudra at the very first sight for his guts to smash his plans of killing Rosen. He was now even more annoyed to see him stand vis-a-vis with him. He made up his mind to defeat Rudra to death.